All right, so as we move through the suprasegmentals, now we're looking at length. Uh, Now, one thing to keep in mind is that length is a linguistic feature related to an acoustic property known as duration, right? Duration is measured in seconds and milliseconds. Um, in the next 2 weeks, we'll dig into the importance of distinguishing between perceptual and acoustic features of speech. For now, just recognize that there are different terms for the perceptual features than for the acoustic features. And in this case, length is perceptual, duration is acoustic. So the duration of segments and syllables is affected by a lot of factors, such as intrinsic properties of the sound itself, where in the syllable, word, and phrase it's found, and the context and style of the utterance. The textbook gives a list of several factors that have been quantified in the case of this particular list in pursuit of better speech synthesis several decades ago. Um, for example, at the end of a clause or phrase, the sound becomes longer, consonants in the middle of a word become shorter, uh, sounds in unstressed syllables become shorter, those in emphasized syllables become longer. Uh, the identity of the following consonant can affect vowel duration. In English, at least, voiceless consonants tend to make the vowel before them shorter. Uh, Consonants become shorter if they're clustered together, for example, in a complex onset or a complex coda. And even something like aspiration seems to add a bit of duration for the vowel or the sonorant consonant immediately following the aspirated voiceless sound. On top of all this, some languages have phonemic length distinctions on consonants, or on vowels, or on both. So when a language has a phonemic length contrast, we use the length diacritic from the IPA, the one that looks like but is technically subtly different from a colon. Uh, So in such a language, the short version we see on the left here is just written plain, and the long version is written with this length marker immediately after it. In vowels, we just call them short and long. With consonants, the long version can often be called a geminate. Geminate, beg your pardon. Um, so I mentioned this funny diacritic that it's a lot like a colon. I have yet to actually see a good reason why we don't just use a colon. Uh, so I'm happy with that. It tends to have rounded dots rather than triangular dots. Um, I'm not going to fuss over that really here, but yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm sure I'm not in charge of the IPA, so this is technically the symbol that we use. Now, there are contexts where more length distinctions are needed, and for those we have the half long and the extra short diacritics. I'm not going to deal with those here either. They're used very rarely, but you can get an idea of how they would relate to the duration of sounds compared to the regular short and the regular long varieties. Now, depending on the language, the long version of a sound, it may be twice as long as the short version, may only be a little bit longer, like maybe a third extra duration, something in between those two. The typical difference is set by convention in each language. Another thing to remember is that uh, languages like Cree and English have quality difference in vowels accompanied by length distinction. So quality difference means the articulators are in different positions. We put them in a different spot on that vowel chart of the IPA. So for example, the English vowel E is normally produced longer than the vowel I, right? So we have E on the right and I on the left. And in English, we often treat the quality difference as the main difference because that's what most of the differences between our vowels are based on. But we will sometimes mark length because that is a phonetic property going along with that. On the other hand, Cree has length contrasts on three of its vowels. So the difference between its long E and its short E is length, but there is also a quality difference. So their short I is actually much like our I sound. So in English, we tend to call it a quality difference primarily, and length is something that tags along. In Cree, they call it a length difference, and the quality difference is something that tags along. And the difference of focus there, the difference of emphasis is mainly around the phonology. We don't have to worry too much about that, but I thought it's worth pointing out that sometimes other things come along with length. And you'll notice, as with stress, duration and quality can play together and reinforce each other. So some of these suprasegmental patterns, we can see them recurring throughout this module. But anyway, that's length. There's not a lot to it. It's a matter of duration. Sometimes these vowel quality things come along with it. We see how to transcribe it, and there you go.